Please welcome political science major, community organizer, attorney, scholar, teacher, author, and state senator, Barack Obama.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. I am extremely pleased to be here at the College of Charleston. When Dr. King stood on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, he didn't say it's a black thing you can't understand. He said it's a human thing you must understand. In the same way that when the Founding Fathers wrote the Declaration of Independence, they didn't say we hold these truths to be self-evident that some people are created equal. We hold these truths that all men are created equal. He left out the women. We had to work on that. But the basic driving force in the best of American politics has always been an insistence that our core values are ones that we can share. And when the powerful and when the powerless are force the powerful to recognize that their values are being violated, that our common values are at stake, and that social justice is an imperative not only to help the poor and the wretched, but also to provide a better community for those who are better off, that's when we make progress. And our individual salvation only comes from our collective salvation. That hitching up your wagon to something larger than yourself is vital not only because it informs and shapes our democracy, but also because it informs and shapes your character. In other words, the reason you get involved in your community, or the reason you get involved in a political campaign, or the reason that you pay attention to the national debate is not simply because you have a debt to people who helped you get to where you are, not simply because you have an obligation to those who are less fortunate than you, although you do have that obligation. The main reason you do it is because you've got an obligation to yourself. You won't be what you might be unless you're engaged beyond yourself. And one of the most difficult things I think about politics today is the poverty and ambition that has been fed to our young people. A poverty of ambition, so that the mark of your success is whether you've got a Rolex watch and a BMW and the latest gadget, as opposed to what kind of difference and shape you've made in the world. A belief that there are better days ahead. When I speak of hope and the importance of hope in politics, what I don't mean is a blind optimism that is an unfortunate tendency in American life. It doesn't mean that we will ignore issues of race, or ignore issues of poverty, or ignore issues of inequality, or ignore issues of injustice, and pretend like everything's great, and hope that those problems go away, and that homeless man will find someplace, somewhere to go. That's not hope. That's willful ignorance. What I mean by hope is the hope of slaves sitting around a fire singing freedom songs, or the hope of protesters the night after they've been jailed during the civil rights movement, or the hope of union workers who are on strike and whose strike fund is diminished and yet are hanging on just barely trying to make it, or the hope of women like Susan B. Anthony, who would never see the changes in their lifetime in terms of their right to vote, but kept on working anyway. Hope in the face of difficulty. Hope in the face of uncertainty. It requires a certain audacity to engage in that kind of hopeful politics. And yet, when we look at the evidence of this country, I am encouraged. Despite all the trials and tribulations and difficulties and racial divisions that we still feel, It is not true that things have not changed. Things have profoundly changed in just one generation. The makeup of this class 25 years ago would be very different. And I wouldn't be staying in this fancy faculty house as a guest or speaking to you today 25 years ago. Things have changed. And those who assert otherwise are doing the movement for social justice an injustice. I believe that despite all our differences, we can live together as one people. I believe that despite our sordid history, we can unite as one nation. I believe that we can, if we do things right, feed the hungry and clothe the naked and house the homeless and teach our children effectively and employ the jobless and reclaim our streets from violence and despair. I really believe in those things. I think ultimately we have a righteous wind at our backs, and that young people like yourselves can carry us the next step forward. As long as you recognize that your salvation really is tied to something larger, as long as you recommit yourself to collective struggle and stand up for shared values and insist on those things that bind you together rather than those things that separate you, then I think our hope will be rewarded, and that my prayers will be answered, and that out of the darkness a brighter day.